Welcome to Quantum Encounters. I'm Dr. Jude Johnson. The purpose of this program is to interview individuals who are on the cutting edge of an optimistic reality where everything and everyone is connected. Today's guest is Bodhi Avinasha. Bodhi has studied widely, exploring both the esoteric and scientific approaches to expanding consciousness and raising awareness. She went through a profound metamorphosis as a sannyasin with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, our foremost tantric master. Bodhi has been teaching Tantra since 1986. She established Tantrika International, an organization that has allowed her to travel extensively, giving transformational courses and private consultation touching the lives of thousands. One student wrote, and I quote, "With a natural understanding of the subtle realms of consciousness, Bodhi is able to define spirit in solid forms that helps us access our own divine source. Bodhi teaches the building blocks to enlightenment, using very simple, sensual, ecstatic techniques." Welcome, Bodhi. Thank you for being on Quantum Encounters.
Thank you for making that possible.
I'd like to first start with the format of this show, and I decided to solicit questions from individuals who weren't familiar with Tantra. And we'll start with one from my own sister, Jennifer. What is Tantra, and what's the origin of Tantra?
Well, of course, you could go several books on that one to try to do the abridged version. Tantra is the study of the subtle energies that run through the body, and learning to bring those into balance, to come into the free flow of that energy, because that energy represents the consciousness that for most of us is available in limited doses, but with some practice, some intention, people can access more and more consciousness, eventually remembering who they really are. And that's, I think, the ultimate goal, is simply recalling your own divine heritage, the truth of who you are.
And what's the mechanics of recognizing this subtle energy?
Awareness. It's more a matter of having your mind quiet down enough so that you can come to appreciate the more subtle workings of your nature. Because most of us are so busy in our head and worrying about what was and what will be that we never come into the moment. And in that stillness, so that eternal now, is where truth is available to us.
So the first step is just immersing yourself in the present moment.
That's the first step, the last step. That's the only step there really is. The rest is all means to that end. Since the more that you are in the present, the more you are living your truth.
A lot of people connect Tantra immediately with sexual
well, that would be
energy.
people in the West. If you were in India, people would be connecting it with black magic, because the power aspect is what's been sensationalized there. So in America, sex sells, and people found that that was the way to make it interesting. So unfortunately, that's where it's gone. It's unfortunate because while the sexual energy is important and probably distinctive in the tantric path, it's certainly not what it's about. It's not making what you already know better. It's taking you to a place that you can't even imagine at this point, using that energy as a way to get there. So it's a means to an end, not the end in itself.
So this energy, this sexual energy, there's another word, kundalini, that I've heard used.
Kundalini is much more than sexual energy. Kundalini is the highest energy that the human body can tolerate. It's closest to the energy of God, the stillness. It's the first energy. It's the most subtle of vibrations. We experience a form of Kundalini in our arousal and orgasmic state. That's one form of the Kundalini, but it goes way beyond that. Because that's a means to access the energy. And it's something everybody's familiar with. They can relate to that. So we use that as an opener, and then take them to other dimensions with that same expression.
So we all touch God in some sense when we come together sexually, but we're nowhere close to that divine.
I think the
place.
orgasm is in that moment probably as close as most people ever get to being at one with anything, hopefully with their partner, and certainly with the infinite if they allow themselves to go there and to stay there for a moment. But orgasms are notoriously brief for many people, and maybe because that's as much as they can stand, to be in that intense, that much truth is overwhelming. for a lot of people who treasure their illusions and they don't want to be disrupted.
If someone were to come to your level 1 course, what would they be engaged in? What would be their initiation to Tantra?
We teach some simple techniques that are among the most powerful in all of the yogic toolbox, and most yogis use similar kinds of tools, but emphasizing some or other depending on their orientation. So we're just using regular
Like what kind of techniques?
Breath techniques. The breath is essential to getting that stillness going and creating an opportunity for awareness to come in. Movement techniques to free up the body, places where energy is not moving freely in the body. When you do tensing and relaxing, you can allow a free flow of energy, which allows more consciousness to come into various places in the body. Old trauma is buried in the body, actually in the tissues of the physical body, and certainly as obstruction of the flow of the more subtle energy through the body. So working in ways that will allow those obstructions, which are subconscious memories or repressions.
There's a connection between one's emotional body and physical body?
Oh yeah, they're intimately connected. The emotions probably rest, well, in both the physical and the subtle energy body. They're both affected by especially old emotions that haven't been worked through and integrated into the whole. That is the subconscious. So the point is not to have a subconscious. There is no sub anymore. When you take the floor away and make yourself at home with all of those parts that are who you are. I think this is what the West has expanded, the old Tantra, which you ask where it came from, and I didn't really respond to that one. It is ancient, certainly has been around as long as there have been people in some form. Certainly the more refined forms emerged out of the India tradition thousands of years ago, so very old. But I think in the West we've come to understand better how psychology works, and then that allows us to take it to that next level of releasing efficiently and painlessly as possible. I understand in the East now, and this may not be true because I haven't been to India, but the men who work very diligently at their practice go through a period of madness. It's almost accepted that that's part of the spiritual path, that you have to go through the craziness part. And I think that's their way of maybe working through some of these demons, if you will, that we all carry around. And I'd like to think we've got a way that people can do that without anything that drastic. You can gently come to know, accept, and integrate whatever fears or resistances or resentments or all that stuff that we carry around that limits our effectiveness. So it's a study of energy, and that certainly includes those levels.
So there were a number of questions from people who were interested in the emotional aspect, particularly the cleansing part, the emotional cleansing. And let me read one of these. Is there a level of emotional cleansing that needs to take place in order to obtain enlightenment? If so, how is that done? Will there be love and kindness guiding you through difficult emotional barriers? And how does one identify what barriers they may have?
Okay, there's 4 questions. All right, let's see. I can't remember the first one.
All at once.
Certainly there must be an emotional cleansing happen. And if you don't consciously enter into that and invite it and set yourself up to receive that, it'll happen by itself. And then you could find yourself going through some discomfort that's not really necessary. I think that's the only way that you can ever hope to do this healing. Even Western psychology has got that one. Carl Rogers, if you don't have the esteem and the love, he didn't use the word love, but support and regard, nobody gets healed. I think that is the atmosphere which allows healing to happen. Any healer is coming from a place of love.
So there is a safety net emotionally
It's got to
for
be.
people who...
People won't go there if they don't feel safe. And any system that is threatening, I don't think people will open up for it. So it's required, yeah. And we go out of our way to create as safe an environment as possible, which means basically as non-judgmental as possible, because it's the judgment that people fear the most. and protect themselves from the most.
Right. Right. Once the profound emotional and ecstatic states are reached, is it a place of vulnerability? And if so, are there tools to help cope with that?
I don't think you experience yourself as vulnerable when you're in an ecstatic state. That is the moment when you really come to remember who you are and your connection and being at one with God, at one with all there is, all of the power of the universe flowing through you. There's no way to feel vulnerable in that moment. When you feel vulnerable is when all the defense mechanisms that you carefully constructed to make sure that nobody actually sees what's going on inside, all the facade that you put on to try to impress people with being who you think they want you to be, all the games that people play, you can feel vulnerable when you get that those aren't working anymore. But the vulnerability is just part of you that needs to be witnessed and accepted, and that's just how I feel.
You mentioned witness. From my reading, that word has popped up a lot, witness consciousness. Could you talk about that and how that relates to Tantra?
Well, this is the key to certainly the emotional clearing process, and in fact to your advancement in your own spiritual evolution. Learning to come to that place of slight detachment where instead of being totally embroiled in emotions to where you lose it and you do things that you regret afterwards, and you're just kind of in another space. It's like someone else is doing it. Most people can find that place. But to come into an emotional space and be watching, like, oh, this is an interesting movie. The witness doesn't have a judgment going. It doesn't say, oh my God, you're still getting pissed off when somebody says that, you're stupid, after 10 years of therapy, you still can't do this. This is not witnessing. That's the mind doing its trip. But the witness is really the presence of soul, is observing and saying, this is the pattern that we've been recurring. Here it is again in a new guise. Okay, this is interesting. It's benevolent.
Without the judgment.
Without a judgment, yeah. And being able to be both in this objective place as well as in the totally subjective, not feeling any less intensely, not shutting yourself down emotionally, suppressing. Having both of those going at the same time, this is the Shakti, if you will, the female, the earth, the emotional, and this is the Shiva, objective, clarity, conscious. When those two can come together, can coexist, that is the tantric experience.
So once you've detached yourself from these emotions,
just a little, you can't go too far back or you lose it.
Does it take the charge out of those emotions?
Eventually. Each time they'll reoccur, you'll find yourself coming back into the same situation, and it may feel like you've gone full circle and here you are back at the same space again, because we each have things that push our buttons, and every time we run into that situation, and existence has an amazing way of providing opportunities to come back to that emotion. But each time, instead of just going around in an endless circle, it's the witness, you're coming from a little higher perspective, so it's more like
so it's kind of like Dante's Inferno backwards.
Swirling your way up, and eventually it gets to where there's not the push on it. It may never go away. You may always find yourself having a certain predilection, wanting to respond in a certain way to a certain situation, but it doesn't have to run your life anymore, and it just becomes a source of amusement if you're working with it consciously. And, oh boy, there goes my thing again. But it's part of you, and you've accepted it and worked it into the big system, like integration.
That leads into another question. Is it possible to feel as though you have lost your identity while recognizing the potential of your own soul?
I've had so many people tell me that they feel like they're different people now. They can hardly remember, like, that was another life. I can't hardly relate to what was happening at that time. I've heard that many times. And some people say that part of them has really died. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe a master could get to that point. I think the parts are still kind of hanging around. But you feel very different about yourself. What can go away more particularly are the doubts and the feeling of inadequacy, and like you're supposed to be more. Because see, when you come to that place, you realize that you already are a divine representation in flesh. It's totally there. It's not like you have to struggle and work to become something. It's just open your eyes and see that's where you already are. And the peace, the sweetness of that is wonderful. A common word out of the Sanskrit, shanti, which means peace, but it's a special kind of peace that comes when you remember who you are. This out of the tradition, out of the wisdom of the ages. It's the ultimate peace.
I think that was the biggest concern, and that was the follow-up to this particular question, was once I've lost that identity, who am I?
Mm-hmm. Well, who you think you are at the beginning of the journey is just as a collection of memories and posturing and attempts to be something, to please someone else. It's your strategies, it's your positions. And ego takes comfort in consistency. It wants to be right. It wants to know that the way it's got things laid out is right. And most of us would rather be right than happy. We'd rather have consistency in the way we hold our world than to admit, that I really see that there's another way to look at this. And I'm going to see how to explore that a little bit.
How does that work in relationships? What if you're a new practitioner of Tantra and your partner is not?
Oh, that happens a lot.
Would there be friction there?
Happens a lot. Partner is usually afraid that if you go off to a Tantra class by yourself, that they have these wild ideas about what happens there. Some of Tantra classes totally justify that wild idea. Ours are much less threatening. But what does happen when people go to our classes is that they reveal themselves, and maybe in a way they haven't been able to do in their relationship. And so there they come back in a different place, and that's frightening to a partner. If one in a relationship does a shift, then whatever dynamic has been going on has to shift. The other one has to do something. And some people get very uncomfortable with that. Some are totally delight in it. They can see that their partner is just opening up and becoming the person they always knew was there, but they hadn't been able to express. And some people get so terrified that they find some excuse to break the relationship up. We lose as many as we win in terms of relationship. But it's not really a loss. It's just telling the truth and realizing that what we've got going here is we're just together for the wrong reason. It's convenient, or it's kind of got a truce going, but it's not a nurturing, a place where both of us are really soaring and growing.
So the end result is leading toward truth eventually.
Yeah, and how the partner relates to that is the whole spectrum of possibilities.
Do you mind if I go a little further with the relationship?
Sure, go ahead.
Clearly, there are many benefits of tantric practice for sustaining a married relationship. But for singles, in what way does or can a tantric practice change the way we fall in love? And I'll add this in because it goes real closely with this. In what ways does or can this practice change the way we end relationships?
In terms of a marriage, a committed relationship, I think that's the most challenging way to do your tantric practice. It's the fastest, but because people inevitably would choose a partner that knows how to push all their buttons, and if they get into tantric practice and are more and more conscious, there's going to be more and more button pushing. It takes a really strong and dedicated couple to survive. That's trial by fire. So don't think that that's all bed and roses coming into it as a couple. It's much more intense, I think, than a single
Is there faster
path.
Progress?
If you're available for that, yeah.
When you say available, what do you mean?
Not resistant. If you're willing to keep looking at what comes up, keep working with it, keep witnessing the patterns that you've developed, and then deciding, do I really want to stay in that pattern, or would I like to experiment with something new? And something new is frightening. People are much more comfortable with the familiar, no matter how unhappy that makes them. So
is this why they call Tantra the warrior's path?
That's one good reason. And in terms of how you fall in love, most people are attracted to someone, initially at least, someone who can recreate for them the original family scene. If you had a mother, I don't know your mother, this is totally if somebody had a mother who was controlling, he would.
Oh, you hit the mark right there.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You would initially find yourself attracted to someone who was controlling. You want to set that up and heal it somehow. Like you never really got the satisfaction. You never really got the sense of being in your power with the mother that had to be in control. So you'd want to pick a partner that you could finish that process with, kind of heal your mother vicariously and heal yourself from what didn't happen as a child. So you wouldn't want to choose someone who already recognized your beauty and grace and strength. It isn't that you like to be bossed around, but you'd be more attracted to someone who wasn't, because you have to bring them full circle to that place of acceptance. And
does that normally happen?
I would say just about every falling in love is the excitement of that inner child thinking, oh, there's Mama, I get a chance to fix her now. That is, and of course it helps if she's attractive and has whatever qualities, but you better believe that dynamic is there until you get it worked through. And once that's done, then you get to be attracted to people for different reasons. But so falling in love is all about an opportunity for therapy, whether you use it or not. But that means, of course, if the woman's attracted to you, that there's Daddy, he's emotionally unavailable. Okay, I'm going to make him see that I'm here and feel my feelings and let me talk about my feelings. And oh, God, not that. So she gets to fix him and he gets to fix her, and neither one of them is happy until they've changed the other one. And this is the basis for most relationships. Is it surprising that more divorces occur every year than marriages? I don't think so, because people don't realize that's what they're doing, and so they can't do it consciously. And there's a lot of blame and guilt, and it doesn't work. The love slips away, and the love would have made it the healing possible, but it's not there. Now, especially if they're in tantric practice, that means there's going to be more energy moving. So you can slow your energy down to where you don't see any of this happening. You can shut your consciousness off to where you don't really get what's going on. You just lock yourself into a little pattern and rut, and that's where a whole lot of people spend their life, because it's comfortable there. They know their little box. But you start expanding when you do the tantric work. And these energies that you've just been blowing off as sexual energy, suddenly you're learning to fill your body with that energy. And this consciousness is expanding, and you see what's going on. And it is a one-way road. Once you become more conscious of what's going on, you don't get to go back to being stupid. It just doesn't happen. So you're stuck with your expanded consciousness.
Now, your gestures about the energy going this way, is that
that's how it does.
Movement of
yes,
the energy?
That's where it goes. Yeah. So we all know how to get sexual energy going. Whatever ways you've found to get yourself turned on, whether it's manually or you use some tantric techniques and learn how to do it with well, we can go into that later if you want the whole lesson. But let's just say we all
use your imagination.
We all know how to get that orgasmic potential going. Yeah, this is probably the essence of the Kriya work, at least, that you intentionally move that energy up through the spine, through the body, and bring it up into the consciousness centers in the brain.
What happens when that energy hits the brain?
Things change. It is an electromagnetic force.
Level?
You bet. Oh, you bet. Yeah, this is magnetic energy. We have the polarity is the electrical, which is associated with the male energy, and the magnetic associated with the earth, with the female energy. And the electrical, emotional aspect is considered part of the Shakti world. Well, this energy drawn up actually influences the cerebrospinal fluid. And that fluid, of course, constantly bathes every cell of the brain. So it's being altered just in a very subtle way. And a matter of fact, that same fluid then descends down the spinal cord, and it goes out through every nervous plexus, which branches out, and eventually every one of the billions of cells, trillions of body cells, receive that slightly energized fluid. So you are redesigning your body and mind.
On a cellular level.
At a cellular level. You hear that expression, But how does it really work? Well, that's how. It's that fluid.
Can one become, for lack of a better word, smarter, more creative
Oh yeah.
with the use of this practice?
More of your brain gets and participates in the process. It's known that those portions of the brain that are kind of shut down, like 90% of the brain, which is hardly used, many of those allow for extraordinary abilities. And that's even coming into the media. There's program after program of people who the dark side of their brain is suddenly waking up and they have clairvoyance and all these abilities. So this is being predicted. And of course, the yogis have known that forever. If you work with these energies, you wake up the parts that are dormant, and yes, those abilities are easily accessible.
So clairvoyance, extra sensory ability, that's a part of us all. We all have those.
This comes to anybody who seriously enters the practice finds themselves more and more able to do that. Yeah, it's just a kind of side effect. I think if you went in there with that as your goal, what you really wanted was to be some great psychic, I think it would be less successful. But it's a wonderful side effect for those who are really going in search of the truth and the bigger picture.
In The Jewel in the Lotus, you wrote, "Awakening the Kundalini is the purpose, primary purpose of human incarnation."
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
We're on a long path of awakening consciousness. That's what humanity has been approaching. Well, since, if you want to go with the Big Bang, it was like 16.4 billion years ago, and since that time, life has been progressing, and consciousness has been progressing to the point where we are now. So that's all the big picture. That's what's happening regardless. And the point is that eventually we turn to a place of total consciousness, of totally remembering what has always been, what is always to be. And
so we're sort of vehicles for the universe realizing itself in human form.
Yeah, and in that way they can interact with their reflections in other people, and you can just see it as a great game if you wish. There's certainly a grounds for that as what life is all about, is just a divine play. And when you begin to see that it's all a game and it takes the onus out of it, you don't. There's not such a burden of getting anywhere or doing anything. You're just there because it's more fun than not being there. And then the whole reason for life changes. I don't know if it's true or not. No one ever will. But life is a way better experience when you come at it through that filter than some of the other filters where doom and damnation and destruction and some of the other fear-based modalities. This one is more celebration-based.
Here's another question.
Okay.
And this is from Ming, one of my students at the university. And he's read your book and loves it, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
But he wants to know, what does she mean by effortless effort?
It doesn't happen automatically. Well, actually, the evolution, if you will, the spiritual growth is happening. I'm sure we're all familiar with people who, on their deathbed or approaching, are in a way mellow space, and maybe they've been really hard to deal with all their life, that everyone in their life goes through some growth and development. And if you want to work at that pace, perfect. Nobody has to do it any differently. But if you want to do a faster pace, then you go through the practices. You do a regular daily time to align yourself with higher consciousness, to attune yourself to a higher vibration, to will yourself to live at another frequency than the folks around you. And that takes some effort, but it's effortless in that you do it because of the joy of being there. It's not that it is a means to an end. It's more that it's more fun living the day. It's more exhilarating and satisfying to live in that energy that you create in your practice than to just trudge through with each day being a burden rather than a joy.
Now, this incarnation that we're in, is it our only incarnation? Does Tantra embrace a reincarnation?
If I choose to look at life through the filter of We have many lives, and each one contributes, and we focus a lot on the physical here, we focus on the mental here, and we continue to grow, that we have many opportunities to experience life in all of its forms. I like that. I was raised with the idea that you had one life, one shot at it. If you blow it, that's it for eternity. You're totally lost. The pressure that